If DMT didn't exist, we would have to invent it. There has to be something in the world. There has to be a weirdest thing. Once we have the concept weird, there has to be a weirdest thing. And DMT is simply it. DMT is that thing which, above all other things, you have convinced yourself doesn't exist. It's the one thing you are certain is impossible. That's how it seemed to me. It completely deconstructs reality in a completely unexpected way. In other words, reality can come apart many different ways, and if it begins to come apart, you hope it will begin to move along some traditionally sanctioned spiritual arc, toward Jesus or heaven or hell or something identifiable. What happens with DMT is there's an eruption of the unexpected. It seems to be in its nature to be unexpected. And it seems to carry the message with incredible intensity that everything you know about reality is wrong. It isn't what you think it is. When you smoke DMT, when I smoke DMT, and according to Rick Strassman's research out at New Mexico, when most people are exposed to DMT, very quickly, like within 30 seconds to a minute, you are conveyed into an inconceivably alien and dramatic environment of 100% hallucination. Nothing you have ever seen before is there. There is nothing there that the English language can describe, because there is nothing there that any English-speaking person ever has encountered before, or German, or French, or Swahili. You are conveyed into not a unitary world, not the white light, the one, or any of that, but a complex, multiplistic world of motion, light, color, depth, interaction, and none of it makes very much sense at all. It's a metaphor for what I'm talking about is, imagine that you were a Paleolithic person getting loaded around a campfire somewhere on the grasslands of Africa. And imagine that for a minute and a half you suddenly found yourself standing in Times Square at rush hour. Well, you could sort of make sense of it. I mean, when you came back, you would say, well, there were people, sort of. There were sort of people, and then there was a lot of motion, and then there was a lot of verticality, but basically you're just thrashing and clawing the air in front of your companions. They are not getting a picture of Times Square at rush hour from this description. DMT is like that. It seems to punch through to an impossible world, a parallel dimension. And it's not as if it would be shocking enough if it were purely incomprehensible. The problem is it's not quite purely incomprehensible. There's a 2% residuum that you seem to be able to relate to. These self-dribbling basketball-like entities that I call tykes that come bounding up and leap into your body and crawl all over you and jump in and out of your chest cavity. They are singing in some kind of a language that you don't hear but see. And so they're singing objects into existence. Some kind of musical grammar is condensing small pieces of furniture around you. And you have to remember, 30 seconds before you were in some shabby apartment, you and your strange friends, fiddling with some drug, and now that's all gone, and you're not sleepy, you're not dazed, you're absolutely who you were. That's the strange thing. DMT doesn't affect the part that we call ourselves. Say, I am who I was, I'm exactly who I was, but what the hell has happened to reality? And it's been entirely replaced by something that I never saw in any science fiction film, never heard about in any fairy tale, never dreamed of, never hinted of, and now I'm fully there. And these little entities are dancing around attention, and then they want you to do something. They want you to sing objects into existence with your voice. And they're doing it. They're showing you how it's done. They somehow, grammar is seen in that world. It's as though a switch has been thrown in your neurophysiological machinery, and language, which you used to hear, you now see. And these things are putting a lot of pressure on you, saying, do it, don't question, don't think, don't reflect, just do it. And I sort of feel something cross between heartburn and satori begin to move its way up my chest, and when it reaches my mouth flies open, and this glossolalia-like linguistic stuff begins to happen, which is like language, like liquid, like silk. I can see it, and it's colored, and it's complicated, and now I do not understand what this is for. I can join you in speculating. It looks to me like, first of all, language itself is a mysterious activity, a behavior. God on the body of nature, human language is the place to look. It is not anticipated in other forms of animal organization, and in us it reaches this excruciating level of expression. And with it, we have created culture, which is a virtual reality that we surround ourselves with, not only of ideologies, Marxism, democracy, monarchy, but buildings, highways, infrastructure. So it's almost as though language is an alien artifact of some sort. You remember Bill Burroughs said it's a virus from outer space. Well, this is sort of like that idea. But language is obviously not something that is a finished enterprise. And I think that we are approaching, either through the natural evolution of the soma, of the body, or through technology, or through some combination of the two, we're approaching a place where we're going to switch channels and switch the language channel into a more broad bandwidth mode, and we're going to see what we mean instead of hear what we mean. That the convention of using small mouth noises to symbolically indicate objects in the world so that those who share the same set of linguistic assumptions can download this acoustical babble and reconstruct a thought out of it, is going to be traded in for something more like a direct acoustical hologram, where then ambiguity is much less prevalent. You know, if I read you a paragraph from Proust, we can spend the rest of the afternoon discussing what did the author mean. You've all been in those situations. What did the author mean? But if I show you a sculpture by Brancusi, we just walk around and look at it. It self-evidently is what it is. It does not have the ambiguity that adheres to written and spoken language. And I think this ambiguity has allowed misunderstanding, and misunderstanding has allowed pain and agony. So it may be that we are on the brink of a higher form of language, the descent of the logos. This would be it, the manifestation of the logos, and the psychedelics, by allowing a look through the hyperspatial window at future states of human organization, as I argued this morning, is actually giving us a taste of a human future that may be far in the future. In the same way that if you had smoked DMT 20,000 years ago, you might have landed in Times Square circa 1960. It's an insight into a future development in the physiology and mind of man, and makes it very suggestive then that DMT is being elaborated in our brains as part of normal metabolism. We have genes that produce DMT. Well, what if those genes were to be switched on in a more dramatic way? Then what would the quality of culture be? If culture is the serotonin trip then what kind of culture would we live in if the serotonin were backed out in favor of a DMT-maintained neural substrate?